What are some red flags from teachers that shout, "Drop this class immediately"? The professor doesn't give lectures or actually teach. Classes consist of weekly presentations from students, who are assigned topics to research. Students also decide what goes on the exam by picking from a list of topics the week before said exam. These topics either weren't discussed in class at all, or came straight from another student's crappy handout. Why did I pay money for that? Or the professor just reads off the PowerPoints. Run. Or the professor just reads off the PowerPoints. One of my classes in first semester, during the first, and for majority of students, last lecture the professor went off on a tangent about how bad lecturers read from their slides, while a good lecturer has the spoken and visual parts complement each other nicely. He then proceeded to place himself firmly in the first category by reading from his Comic Sans written presentation for the next hour and a half. Some history teacher I had got all his PowerPoints from other teachers, but I think he used the same tests from 1972, so they had frick all to do with anything he ever talked about. He also didn't know how to start the PowerPoint slideshow and went through the slides not in full screen. Then when he was passing out the things, where you review the teacher at the end of the year, don't bother writing. He should start the slideshow. Because he's old and doesn't feel like learning that, and some things are what they are. I don't have time to answer all of your questions. Stop complaining about how hard the material is. You're all adults and can figure it out. Don't ever complain about any of your professors until you do their evaluations at the end of the semester. What? I did the exam I'm about to give you, and it only took me 10 minutes, so it's easy. First of all, you're an expert in this field, and the class average was a D. That third quote is just a horrible thing to say. My cultural anthropology class. Our professor was a great teacher, but he would sometimes forget he was an expert on the subject and we weren't. After a student brought up that he used super complex terms, he actually went out of his way to be more thorough, and our class average jumped up significantly. Wow, a professor that actually does his job. My Econ 101 undergrad prof was one of the nicest and most patient of professors, and stated outright he knew most of us were not finance majors. But he lost it, meaning he spoke a bit sarcastically and raised his eyebrows when he said about the midterm. I've received complaints that the vocabulary I used in the midterm was too complex. The word in question was accrue. This was followed with a very uncomfortable silence as the class of 100 were desperate to know which plebs had made the complaint. This was at a pretty highly ranked college in our state. I don't believe in giving A's because I believe no one is perfect. Okay, well, the rest of academia has to follow the same GPA scale, including many of these kids' scholarship requirements and entrance to major requirements. Professors shouldn't get to artificially mess with that because they don't believe in it. I'm an English professor and my boss, she oversees the required Gen Ed English Comp classes, was going on and on about a student's paper, how great it was, yada yada, talking our ears off about it. I asked her what the student got. A 96. Not 100. I never give hundreds. I was like, crap, I give probably 600s a semester. If there's really nothing to be found wrong with an assignment, then dang, give them the 100. They deserve it. That makes me so mad. My English teacher says she doesn't give perfect scores because I'm an English teacher and English teachers don't do that. Wow, that's so funny. Where would she get that idea? I think that it can be difficult to get 100s on English assignments, especially papers, because everyone has room for improvement. However, the teacher should have to give reasoning for a score under 100. If they can't tell the student how to improve their writing, then it should be a perfect score. So the math department recently met and decided that my class will no longer be considered a math class and won't count towards the major, nor will it count towards any distribution requirements. All it will count towards is the total number of credits you need to graduate. What class was that? It took all the learning material taught in 3 weeks in one of the core, mandatory classes for the math major and stretched it out into a semester-long course. Since you already had to have taken the core class, it was essentially just retaking one easy part of the course. They stopped offering it soon after. If a real tenured professor was teaching it, that sounds like a ploy to have them quit from being marginalized, since the department can't fire them. But you're on tenure teaching easy stuff. That's a good deal, if I've seen one. Maybe for the professor, sure, but it's selfish, and it comes at the cost of students paying tuition, university wasting money, and the demotivation of his co-workers who see this guy get a pass. Honestly, I don't understand this line of thinking. Same with unions. This line of thinking with tenure gives it a bad name. Unions, tenure, and the like are meant to protect workers from extenuating circumstances, bad managers, etc. It is not meant to be a free paycheck. Anything less than that is why there is so much animosity towards unions. I had a lecturer kick someone out of class for repeating her answer to a question to a student who hadn't heard the whole thing. In my second year of university, that class would have been empty if it wasn't a required course. A guy dropped his pen and it rolled away. He stood up to pick it up and the professor said, translated, "What are you standing up for?" Rather than paying attention. He said he dropped his pen and the professor laughed at him and made some stupid remark about him being an adult that should be able to manage his stuff. Now notice the guy hasn't picked up his pen at this point. It's rolled away and he just barely stood up. So he starts walking towards it when the professor starts going again. Really? The guy starts to explain but gets shushed by the professor, so he shrugs it off, picks up the pen and sits down. Now this might seem like the end, but oh no, not with this professor. He just got ready for his bullcrap and now he's fired up. Are you just going to sit down like that after interrupting my class twice? Surely you understand this isn't going to work, right? The guy stood up and left, and the professor had a grin on his face that read, "Can you believe this kid just disrupted my class?" Frick that professor, the dude just dropped his pen. It would make me very happy if the majority of the class just walked out silently with that student. If they start acting like jerks, or talk about how no one passes their class, then get the frick out. By the midterm, only half of the class will still be in the class, because that's the nature of this university. He was right and wrong. Half the class had disappeared by the midterm. Every other class I attended at the university was full until the final day. Arrogant jerk. That's actually true of all of my classes at my university, so the professor that told us this was completely right. It's freaking annoying that people pack into classes and then stop going halfway through the semester. Like, I needed that class and you just wasted a space. I have a teacher that has been designing his course so that everyone passes and learns. He says that students tend to learn more and be motivated when they are not suffering a course. I really did learn a lot with him. It depends on the class. If it is organic chemistry or something, then yeah, it will be freaking hard and tons of people will drop out. But if it is Econ 1 or something like that, then it should be taught in a way that makes it accessible and maybe even a bit fun. Most of you will not pass this class. Bye. I don't understand this mentality of some professors. Is your goal to teach or to be a jerk? I'm all for challenging students, but why aim for a high rate of failure? Some of them just enjoy being a jerk. I had a professor say this, but I took the class anyway. He failed me when I confronted him with the fact that all my scores were good, the things listed as contributing to your grade. He just said it was his discretion. I don't know how many of his other students he failed just to be a jerk. I'm going to assume this happened too long ago to help now, but if this happens to anyone reading this, take it to your school's student advocate office or the dean of your department. Even at schools with tenure, you can appeal this kind of thing if you've got communications and a paper trail to back you up. I did this. Had a 74% going into the final and failed the class. Asked the professor why. She said I bombed the final, but wouldn't allow me to see the test because it was confidential. Appealed to the department head. They passed me with a C-. I don't usually like the squeaky wheel gets the grease philosophy, but in university it often works and is at times necessary. No one gets an A in my class. This is the worst. It can permanently frick up your GPA, which can mess you out of scholarships and competitive programs. Also, the professor can sit in their ivory tower saying, nobody gets an A, because A is perfection and nobody's perfect. I had a teacher with this exact kind of mentality in 3rd grade, and only now do I realize the mercy granted to so many college kids' futures. 3rd grade teacher acting like that. What the frig went wrong in their life to end up like that? I dunno, but she even corrected anyone who said, practice makes perfect, with her own stupid version that isn't even catchy. Practice makes better. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more videos like this. Don't forget to leave your stories in the comments below.